So, hello and welcome along to another edition of Isolation Interviews here on Hospital Radio Reading and for my YouTube channel. And I'm super excited to be joined by an amazingly funny guest in the form of Tom Allen. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, that is a very generous thing to say. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to talk. I love talking.
It's my absolute pleasure. I must admit, when I sort of promoted the fact I was interviewing you, I had a lot of people who got in contact to say they love you. You seem to be so popular at the moment. For you, where did comedy kind of start for you? How did you kind of realize you were funny?
Oh, well, I think it was as a kid, actually. People sort of laughed at me. and I suppose I realized it was a way of, there's a cliche that people like comics like, try and be funny to keep the bullies away. I didn't do that. I don't think that was quite true, but I felt like it was a way of communicating. I think I was a very eccentric child and I didn't really know where I fit with anything. And I felt like I always had this posh voice. My mum and dad don't have a voice like posh like mine. So people were always like, why does he talk like that? So it was always this kind of anomaly. And I realized that if I was funny, people kind of like, oh yeah, that's funny. Oh, he's so funny. And then, sometimes I think I'd actually be sort of quite serious. People like, oh, what a laugh. So I think it came from that, really, a sort of means of communicating, I suppose, if that's not a very pretentious thing to say. I sort of find it's a way of, comedy is a way of kind of establishing that you are, you understand one another. I think that's my favorite type of comedy. We go, like, we're both on the same page here. We see the world in the same way. We laugh at the world in the same way. And I think it's always been that, really. It's been a way of me identifying friends. And I like to think that's what I try and carry with it. Because I think laughing at someone is not very nice, but laughing with somebody is the best thing ever.
And that's the thing, is that quite often with comedians, you always come across as quite confident. Would you say you are quite a confident person?
I always think it's this weird contradiction of being confident in your insecurities. So you kind of end up being like, aware of yourself as very insecure, aware of yourself as being different, quirky, however you see yourself. But you somehow learn to embrace it. I think that's the kind of duality of it, because I think most of the time, I think for me, the comics I like are the ones who are the most kind of humane, like the most kind of vulnerable, the most kind of happy to bare their souls a bit, because I think you feel that connection to them the most. But to do that, I suppose you have to have a degree of confidence in it that it's going to be okay.
Do you remember the first time that you actually went on a stage and performed? And do you remember that feeling? How was it for you?
Well, as an adult, I started doing stand-up when I was 22. And I remember doing my first gig, and it was sort of probably not a very healthy way of approaching it. I just thought, let's get through the next like 5-10 minutes and then it'll be fine. And I think that's sort of that's sort of what I did. I just sort of thought, well, let's get it over with. And then maybe it's unhealthy to be like that, but also maybe it's actually quite good, because I think thinking is often the enemy creatively. The more we think, the less gets done. So I think that, sorry, I'm just doing my cuffs so talking to you. So that I remember doing, my first gig was at Bethnal Green Working Men's Club in 2005, 16 years ago. And coming up to 17 years ago, actually, it was January time. And some friends of mine had encouraged me to do it and to sort of prepare for it. And I think I enjoyed it, but I was glad when I felt like I've done it now. And then people said, oh, you're quite interesting, you should do it a bit more. And I think I just sort of liked that challenge of it. Because when I started, there weren't really comics. The comics were very blokey. It was a very blokey world of comedy. And it was the comedy clubs, sometimes they still are, but were very kind of places full of machismo and drinking and confidence and bravura. And there wasn't really a space for kind of like, I would like to tell a story. So I sort of I think the fact that I tried to do that meant that I kind of stuck out a bit, which was a good way. I kind of like the audacity of being like that, being like different, sort of trying to tell stories. It sometimes worked, it sometimes didn't.
And of course, getting to support the likes of Michael McIntyre, Sarah Millican, that must have been quite a pinch me moment for you in your career.
Well, yes, Sarah has always been very generous to me. And we started out about the same time. Sarah always had such a great work ethic, and and always has such a great work ethic and has such a clarity of her voice, of what she's doing on stage. And she really guided me and gave me the opportunity to support her over a long period of time, which really built up my confidence. I've been going for about 10 years at that point, maybe longer actually. Been going for ages. And yet doing that regularly in front of big crowds where I knew I had her support, but yet doing support for somebody is quite intimidating because essentially the people you are performing for have not come to see you. So you have to reprogram your mind a bit to go, it's okay. Like, it's okay if they don't like you, and it's all right to kind of sell yourself a bit to them, and kind of, so I'd sort of go, you'd acknowledge it really and go, I know you're not come to see me. And I sort of did it in a way that I was like, I'm going to have a good time on stage. And I think if you have a good time, it draws other people in because they're like, oh, I want to have a good time like this guy. And so I've tried to always embody that approach on stage. I think it can, particularly when I first started doing stand-up on television, people were like, why is he talking so loud? Why was he speaking so fast? And I think I learned that from doing support, because you had to speak fast and loud, otherwise they wouldn't listen to you. So that sort of they were big learning curves. And actually Sarah's audiences were very nice, and I had very nice times, really. And Michael the same. Michael's such an abundance of energy on stage that he's unashamed in that, and I think that's something really great, because you want to watch comics who are full of energy, because you go, oh, I didn't know you were allowed to live your life like that. I didn't know you were allowed to live your life skipping around. Oh, that's great. It's sort of magnetized to it.
I mean, growing up, who were the comedians that you looked up to, or that you maybe sort of thought, oh, that's kind of where I sort of have an interest in? You know, were there people that you watched growing up?
Victoria Wood was a big influence on me, and I always loved everything about her. I loved the way that she could do hilarious sketches that were sort of so skewed and so kind of so sort of surreal. And Stuart Lee sort of talks about her as perhaps the first alternative comedian in this country. And she would do stand-up, which was just her telling stories about getting the train or interacting with the neighbours, or kind of quite suburban, sort of normal stories that she managed to make hilarious. And the way she would round it off with a song, which of course has been like a thing in lots of shows for a long time, but the way that she would sing a song that was funny but poignant, I just love that middle ground of funny and sad. And I always really liked Alan Bennett as well, for the same reason, that I've always been fascinated by the quirks of how people talk to each other, and the kind of little vocal idioms they use.
Now, obviously, over the last sort of 18 months, life has been completely strange. I mean, for you, how were you affected in the early days of lockdown? I mean, did it affect you too much work-wise? How was it for you?
At first, it was, well, like for everybody, I guess we were all just so frightened, weren't we? And yeah, all the work stopped. So it was very unnerving. And I suppose we just didn't know what was going to come next. So it was very worrying. And I found myself happily, I suppose, channeling my anxiety into making stuff. And I wrote a book, and I started doing silly sketches just that I put up on Instagram and social media every day, of just me talking to a woman who I made out of balloons, and just sort of doing that as a daft thing. And I thought, well, why not? Well, I've never done anything like that. So I don't feel very confident doing videos online, but I really enjoy doing that. So it's quite fun, and I suppose it's that sort of thing, isn't it? That in those moments of adversity, sometimes you can push yourself to. I mean, I was very fortunate, really, that I was able to carry on doing those things. But I think that it was. I tried to channel the negativity into something positive, and I think that's what stand-up does, and comedy can do sometimes. Is just sort of, you take the sadness or the bad thing or the terrifying thing in your world, and you turn it on its head, or you try and make it funny so you can manage it.
I mean, obviously, the one thing that, you know, comedians love is that live audience. So I imagine that when you can't perform to a live audience, it must be strange, but also kind of having to, you know, get used to potentially sometimes doing it over Zoom or different ways of getting to the crowds.
Well, I think, like I say, comedy is so much about connection, and you connect with the person you watch, and you connect with the people who you laugh alongside. But actually, I felt very grateful that we had Zoom, and I did do lots of gigs on Zoom, and I think because we were all so desperate for those moments of connection with people, that you know, both sides, whether you're performing or watching, that it made it all kind of, you found new ways of reaching out to people and connecting with them, I think. And I know that I had lovely experiences and moments, and just, seeing people, I'll never forget those Zoom gigs where you just saw people who lived on their own and just were watching their screen and just just wanting a bit of a laugh and a bit of a giggle. Yeah, it was very, very, very strange, but it's often the case. Things like comedy actually come into the fore when people need cheering up. So you sort of, I felt maybe a bit virulent of me to say, but a sense of duty to try and make people laugh in any way I could.
And I mean, the other thing for you is, of course, the presenting as well, which, I mean, do you remember the first time you sort of tried your hands at that? Was that something that took a bit of getting used to, or did you kind of feel naturally drawn to it?
I mean, you're not supposed to say this, are you? You're supposed to be like, I never imagined myself, I never dreamed, but honestly, I always wanted to be on television, and I always dreamed of being on television. And as a child, my dad sometimes borrowed a camcorder off his friend at work. The camcorder wasn't really a cam, it was a record, it was like a massive, it was like the size of a person. The camera was so big. And I remember insisting on making my own gardening program. I think Mum's got the tapes of them somewhere. You should look them up. But my first presenting foray, was that, which was, I don't know. Yeah, it was. I just always loved the idea of the magic of television and the glitz and the shininess of it. I always loved.
And you've obviously had, working with Lord Sugar on The Apprentice You're Fired.
Yes.
Hired. I mean, what is it like working with Lord Sugar? How is that?
Well, we don't see him that often on our show because all the boardroom stuff is, kind of done separately. But he has been so generous to me and so supportive and really encouraging. I have a lot of respect for him because he is, he is a very successful person. He doesn't need to make a program where he supports young entrepreneurs, but he still does it. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. That he, he does kind of care about the people he works with, and he does. I think, there's an element of theatre, dare I say. I mean, he's not pretending when he's saying you're fired or when he's getting annoyed, but he, I think whilst he can be very serious, I think he can also be very kind and very encouraging. But I don't know. Maybe he wouldn't thank me for telling you that.
And of course, we must talk about the Great British Bake Off and Extra Slice. Working with Joe looks like so much fun. I mean, how is that?
Wonderful. Like, we have such a nice time. Joe is the kindest person, the most generous person. And I just have a silly time going around the audience making fun of their cakes. I'm amazed no one's punched me in the face. But Joe is somebody I looked up to, as a kid, and it was always so, always been herself. And I think that's what's so amazing about Joe. She's always been unapologetically herself, and she's been alternative and subversive throughout her career. And I think that's really amazing. She's always stuck a finger up at authority, and I think that there's a great deal to be said for that, to be applauded. She's really inspiring and really cool. She's the epitome. She's probably the coolest person I know. Yeah.
And I mean, of course, working with cakes. Do you like cakes? Do you get fed up of cakes?
I do like cakes. I have a sweet tooth. I get some of the spongy ones I get fed up with, and I don't like too much icing. Like, when people make those illusion cakes, which do look beautiful, but they've got loads of fondant icing, which I just always think is tastes a bit synthetic. So I like pastry. I like patisserie, viennoiserie. I like a crisp pastry case with maybe a citron in the middle, a tart of citron, like a lemon custard. Oh, I think that's lovely. I like custard. I like pastry, basically. But I do like. But yeah, I do like it all, really. I've learned about more different types of cakes and that, but it's all good. I like bread as well. That's my downfall.
I mean, can you bake yourself? Are you good in the kitchen yourself?
I can't bake myself. I won't fit in the oven. But I do like baking. I don't have and cooking. I don't have that much time to do that. The nature of my work is often I work in the evening, so I like it when you have a bit of time to chop and prepare and get everything nice, make it all look nice. I'm quite fussy as well when I'm preparing food for other people. I like it to be just so, and table to be just so. I think I'm quite a stressful person to to watch cook and to be cooked for. You know, all these TV chefs make it all so calm. I think if I was a TV chef, I'd be sort of like, no, don't do it like that. Throwing things on the floor in disarray. But I do like it. Yeah, I do. I like cooking.
And I imagine as well when you get to do a lot of these comedy panel shows, which always look fun to appear on. And
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what's the kind of the process with that? I mean, do you kind of know what you're going to be asked beforehand, or is it all off the cuff?
Sometimes it depends on the show, really. But things like, say, Mock the Week, you obviously know what you're going to be talking about because of the news. Although we never make fun of the harrowing stories that are in the news week on week. It tends to be the light ones. You can sort of guess what they'll be talking about. And yeah, you try. I think when I first started out, I found it quite nerve-wracking. If anybody ever saw me do any of those earlier appearances, I always felt quite nervous. But you've got to realise it's just fun. None of it matters. It's just having a bit of a laugh with people. And I always enjoy different people's voices and stuff. I think when I first started them, they were still quite macho. There was still quite a lot of men who wanted to like put you down and get out of my way and elbowing their jokes in. But now it's a bit kinder, and I always think that's better because I think, I don't know, I don't laugh. I don't find it very funny, that kind of blokiness. Whereas I find different people's stories funny.
And I mean, is there a dream going forward? Is there something you would love to do that you've not had the pleasure or the chance to do yet?
I would always dreamed of having a chat show or a talk show of some kind, something that's silly. I like something that's silly that brings people together. I like talking to the audience though as well. So I don't know, maybe something. I'd quite like to do the Generation Game. If they ever bring that back. But I'd like to. I think people talk about, you know, everybody's just watching Netflix now, and I think maybe they are, and Netflix is great too. But I think I do like entertainment television. You know, like where it's just, whether that's the One Show or you know, BBC Breakfast or a studio sitcom, or you know, lots of things I like. Or, you know, something like Strictly, I think is such a wonderful show because you feel like you're at this amazing event every Saturday. So I suppose I like all this. I'm just feel very lucky to keep working in television. Like I said, I've always wanted to do it, so I feel very happy.
I mean, do you remember the first time that you were sort of recognised in public? And do you remember the first time that you realised that, you know, you were famous? What was that as an experience? How was that?
I didn't, I suppose because of the way people watch television now, I didn't, you know, you don't, I think 20 or 30 years ago, you could be on one thing and people were like, it's that guy. Whereas for me, I just sort of did as much as I could and just sort of tried to keep busy and tried to sort of just did all the things that people asked me to do because I was very excited. And so as a result of that, and I would say doing Cat Does Countdown and Extra Slice, probably, I would say, and Mock the Week, they were the ones that sort of pushed me forward, and then doing things like Apprentice You're Fired and co-hosting on Bake Off Professionals and stuff like that. That stuff kind of carried that on and maybe took me to new audiences. But so I don't know. I still feel very flattered if people come and talk to me. I think I do have an unfortunate habit of. So I think that's if you do get recognised, the convention is that you're like, I'm too busy, I can't talk to you, I'm sorry. My inclination is to I just like talking to people, so I keep them talking for so long, and then they look really bored, and then they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I've got to go now. I've got to go back to work, and I'm like, oh, sorry, and I feel like I've kept them talking too long. so it's nice to talk to people. My mum likes it. My mum likes me getting recognised. They looked round at you. They turned around to look at you. Mum likes that.
Now, we must, of course, talk about the NHS, who have done such an amazing job over the last year and a half. Well, forever, you know, they've always been amazing, but in particular, this last year and a half. What has your opinion been on the NHS? What would you like to say?
Well, I think it's the most incredible institution and an achievement, and I think as well, I've always liked history, and I think when you look at when it was created at the end of the Second World War, and what a different world it was that provided healthcare to the nation, and you know, at a time, you know, when people had fought through basically 2 world wars. We're doing this just after Remembrance Day, so I suppose that's in my mind. But you know, people have been through so much, and people lived in such difficult circumstances, and then Bevin and Attlee and that time created the National Health Service. It's quite an extraordinary thing, and I think it is part of that era, you know. And I feel like it is part of that thing that we remember at Remembrance Day. That kind of, it was about the optimism of a world that didn't have wars and did care for each other. And I suppose that's why I feel very passionate about it now, very protective of it, because it still manages to care, I think, that for people in a way that the world doesn't necessarily want people to care. The world that can feel very cruel. It is the ultimate protest against that, you know, because it is about providing health care for the people who need it, even, you know, regardless of how much they've paid. And that's the ultimate care, isn't it? And so I think that's very powerful.
Now, I mean, just before we go, is there any messages you'd like to give to anyone who's currently in hospital at the moment, you know, not having the best of times? Anything you'd like to say to them?
Well, touch wood, I don't think there are people I know in at the moment, but touch wood. But I would like, I'll send my love to everybody who's there. So in being non-specific, I'll be specific to everybody, and no, just sending a big hug to everybody in hospital, and I hope they're okay, and keep themselves entertained, and going to have a nice chat in that little shop. That's always quite fun, isn't it? Those little shops in hospitals, I like that. And yeah, I hope they're managing somehow to have a laugh if they can. That would be good. Thank you so much, Tom. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Of course, keep safe, and yeah, thank you again. Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for doing this wonderful show. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honoured.